I didn't know my life was about to split cleanly in two until the night my husband's boss spat on me at a company party and claimed my husband belonged to him. If that sounds dramatic, it's because it was. My name is Natalie Cooper, and up until that moment, I thought I understood how power worked. I thought it lived in titles, paychecks, corner offices, and men who walked into rooms expecting everyone else to shrink. I was wrong. Power, I learned that night, reveals itself most clearly when someone abuses it, and even more clearly when they choose the wrong person to do that to. The party itself was everything I hate about corporate life, wrapped in marble floors and overpriced champagne. Summit Creative's annual rooftop gala, crystal chandeliers, jazz music that sounded expensive and exhausting, smiles sharpened by ambition. Every handshake came with a silent calculation. What can you do for me? I was there as my husband's wife, Rachel Cooper, creative director material long before anyone officially recognized it. Brilliant, driven, endlessly capable. She'd been anxious for weeks about this night, not because of the party, but because of him, her boss, Derek Walsh, a man whose reputation was whispered in hallways and erased from HR files, a man who confused intimidation with leadership. 2 hours in, with the city glowing below us and the room buzzing with forced laughter, Derek approached. Drunk, confident, dangerous in the way only powerful men who think they're untouchable can be. He looked at Rachel like she was an asset. Then he looked at me like I was furniture. And then he said it. "At work, she's mine," he announced loudly, hand gripping my shoulder as if we were old friends. "You wait your turn at home." The room froze. I felt heat rush through my body. Not rage, not yet, but something colder, something sharper. The kind of clarity that arrives right before everything changes. And then, as if the humiliation weren't complete enough, he leaned forward and spat. Not fully, just enough. A gesture meant to remind me of my place. What Derek didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the woman he had just disrespected was not powerless, not invisible, not harmless. That night didn't end his career immediately, but it started the countdown. And none of us would walk away unchanged. Before that night, before Derek's words sliced through the room and rewrote the trajectory of our lives, I believe my marriage was built on balance. I was 34 years old, working in cybersecurity consulting, a field that rewards precision, foresight, and restraint. I designed and maintained digital infrastructure for companies that couldn't afford mistakes. Fortune 500 corporations, financial institutions, occasionally government-adjacent agencies that preferred discretion over recognition. The pay was excellent. The responsibility was enormous. And the irony was that the better I was at my job, the quieter I had learned to be about it. When people heard cybersecurity, they either panicked or became suddenly entitled. They wanted free tech support, or they joked nervously about whether I could read their emails. So somewhere along the way, I stopped explaining. I told people I built furniture, which wasn't exactly a lie. I did build furniture, evenings and weekends, sanding wood until my thoughts slowed and my hands remembered what calm felt like. Rachel and I met in college. She was the kind of woman professors remembered years later. Sharp mind, relentless work ethic, creative in a way that wasn't flashy but foundational. While others chased attention, she built substance. We became friends first. Late-night study sessions, shared exhaustion, quiet laughter over terrible cafeteria coffee. Then something deeper, something steady. We grew together, not explosively, but intentionally. After graduation, Rachel joined Summit Creative and climbed quickly, not because she played politics. She hated them, but because she delivered. Campaigns that worked, clients that renewed, teams that trusted her. I watched her give everything to that company, often more than it deserved. And Derek Walsh was always there. Even before she worked directly under him, his presence loomed. Stories circulated, junior staff requesting transfers, HR complaints that vanished, talented women burning out after a year in his department. But Summit was the kind of place that protected results over people, and Derek produced awards. Rachel tried to frame him as intense but brilliant. I tried not to push. It was her career, her battlefield. I knew better than to fight a war she hadn't asked me to join. Over the years, we settled into a rhythm. Mortgage, responsibilities, quiet pride in each other's accomplishments. We supported each other without competing. I never needed to be the loudest person in the room. Rachel never needed permission to shine. At work events, I stayed in the background, Rachel's spouse, smiling politely, holding a drink, nodding through conversations about branding strategies and market penetration. Most of her coworkers knew me as the carpenter wife, the one who built bookshelves and coffee tables and didn't ask questions about quarterly projections. I let them believe that. It kept things simple. Rachel, meanwhile, carried more than she admitted. Late nights, weekend emergencies, Derek's expectations that blurred professional boundaries, but never crossed lines overtly enough to document. She told herself it was the cost of ambition, of being taken seriously. I told myself she was strong enough to handle it. What neither of us realized was how much ground had quietly shifted beneath our feet, how Derek had mistaken her dedication for ownership, and my silence for insignificance. That party wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the moment all the ignored warning signs finally aligned and demanded to be answered. Looking back now, the signs were there long before the party. They weren't dramatic. Nothing you could point to and say, that's it, that's the problem. They were small distortions, tiny bends in normalcy that slowly warped into something heavier. My husband Daniel started coming home later. Not always because of deadlines, sometimes because Derek needed just one more thing, a revision, a call, a last-minute crisis that somehow couldn't wait until morning. Daniel would apologize as he loosened his tie, already exhausted, already bracing for another early start the next day. It's just how Derek operates, he'd say, trying to sound casual. He expects availability. Availability. It's a word that sounds harmless until it starts eating into your life. I noticed how often Derek's name came up in our conversations, not with respect, more with tension. Daniel would recount meetings where Derek interrupted him mid-sentence, dismissed ideas he later claimed as his own, praised him publicly but undermined him privately, the kind of manipulation that leaves no fingerprints. I asked once, carefully, does he talk to everyone like that? Daniel hesitated just a second too long. Mostly, he said, but he's harder on people he thinks are replaceable. That word lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest. Then there were the social boundaries. Text messages after midnight. Calls on weekends that started as work-related and drifted into commentary, on Daniel's potential, on his loyalty, on how lucky Summit was to have someone who understood sacrifice. Derek framed exploitation as mentorship, control as opportunity. And Daniel, like so many talented people under a powerful boss, tried to normalize it. I don't want to rock the boat, he told me once, staring at his laptop long after the screen had gone dark. I've worked too hard to get here. I didn't argue. I understood ambition. I understood endurance. But something about the way Derek spoke, how he inserted himself into our time, our plans, our marriage, set my nerves on edge. The first time I met Derek properly, months before the party, he'd smiled too widely and shaken my hand too firmly. So you're the wife, he'd said, eyes flicking over me quickly before returning to Daniel. Must be nice, having someone who keeps things stable at home. It wasn't a compliment, it was a dismissal. At other events, I watched how people reacted to Derek's presence. Shoulders stiffened, laughter sharpened, conversations adjusted their tone mid-sentence. He didn't command loyalty, he commanded fear. And fear is contagious. Daniel's coworkers avoided eye contact when Derek was nearby. Junior staff deferred even when they were right. Ideas died quietly in meetings because no one wanted to risk becoming a target. I started to see how deeply Derek had embedded himself into the culture, not just as a boss, but as a force people organized their behavior around. The night of the party, as we got dressed, Daniel lingered in front of the mirror longer than usual. He's going to be in rare form tonight, he said, adjusting his cufflinks. These things bring out the worst in him. I asked, do you want me to come? He smiled softly. I want you there. Neither of us said what we were both thinking, that my presence might make Derek behave. That assumption turned out to be dangerously wrong. By the time Derek made his way toward us at the party, all those small warning signs, the late nights, the blurred boundaries, the quiet fear, had aligned into something unmistakable. The atmosphere shifted, and the man who thought he owned the room finally said out loud what he'd believed all along. The moment Derek reached us, the air changed. It wasn't subtle. Conversations nearby thinned out, laughter dropped half a note, and bodies instinctively angled away, close enough to listen, far enough to pretend they weren't. Derek moved like a man who expected the room to bend for him, his confidence swollen by expensive whiskey and unchecked authority. He stopped in front of Daniel first. Well, If it isn't my star player, Derek said, clapping Daniel on the shoulder with a familiarity he hadn't earned. His grip lingered a beat too long. Burning the candle at both ends as usual, huh? Daniel smiled politely, tight, controlled. Then Derek's gaze slid to me. Not curious, not respectful, appraising, like I was a detail he hadn't bothered to catalog yet. And you must be, he squinted, waving a hand vaguely. Clara? My name isn't Clara. It's Natalie, I said calmly. Right, Natalie, he replied, already bored. You're what was it, the carpenter? The word landed wrong. Not inaccurate, just intentionally diminishing. I build furniture, I said evenly, among other things. A few people nearby chuckled. Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. He turned back to Daniel, launching into a monologue about work, how hard Daniel worked, how dedicated he was, how available. Derek spoke loudly, theatrically, ensuring an audience. People don't understand the commitment it takes to succeed at this level, he announced. Late nights, weekends, sacrifice. The creative department doesn't sleep. Daniel shifted beside me. I felt it, a tightening in his posture, a familiar discomfort. Then Derek did it. He placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder again and leaned in, voice dropping just enough to feel intimate while still carrying across the surrounding silence. At work, Derek said, smiling broadly. He's mine. I need him. Deadline at midnight? He's there. Client emergency on Sunday? He's there. He paused, eyes scanning the faces around us, enjoying the attention. So what I'm saying is, he's mine at work. You wait your turn at home. The room went still. Not awkward still, not polite still. The kind of stillness that follows an explosion. Someone gasped. I saw a woman from accounting freeze mid-sip. Even the jazz band seemed to lose its rhythm. Daniel's face drained of color. I could feel his humiliation like heat radiating through his arm where it brushed mine. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Years of conditioning held him in place. Derek wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his expression smug, and made a small, dismissive spitting motion in my direction. Not dramatic, not messy, just enough. Enough to be unmistakable. I reached up slowly, wiped my cheek with one of the ridiculous linen napkins from the bar, and folded it carefully in my hand. My heart wasn't racing. My breathing didn't hitch. I was very, very calm. I met Derek's eyes and said, conversationally, "Are you sure you're his boss?" The question cut through the silence. Derek blinked. "Excuse me?" Because that, I continued, nodding toward him, is the kind of behavior HR usually uses in training videos. You know, what not to do. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, short, panicked bursts. Derek's face shifted. Smugness faltered. Something sharper flickered beneath. Before he could respond, Daniel's hand clamped around my arm, hard. He smiled tightly at the people around us and guided me toward a quieter balcony area, his grip steel strong, his jaw set. The city lights spread below us, glittering and indifferent. "What the hell was that?" he hissed the moment we were out of earshot. His voice shook, not with anger, but fear. "You embarrassed him, in front of everyone." I stood up to him, I said quietly. "He was drunk," Daniel said, though even he didn't sound convinced. "You can't provoke him like that. He has influence. He can ruin careers." "He spat on me," I replied. "That's not provocation, that's a line." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "This is my job, Natalie, my career. I've worked for years for this, and Derek, whether we like it or not, controls a lot of that." I watched him struggle, watched the weight of fear press down on him. "I need to go back in there," he said finally. "Smooth this over, apologize." "Don't," I said softly. "I have to." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it, the calculation, the cost of dignity versus survival. "Just stay out here," he said. "Cool off, don't talk to anyone, especially not Derek." I stayed on the balcony long after he left, the city humming below, my reflection faint in the glass. What Daniel didn't know, what Derek definitely didn't know, was that Summit Creative's entire digital infrastructure sat on systems I had personally designed. The woman Derek had just humiliated, she was the one holding the keys. I stayed on that balcony longer than I needed to. The night air was cold, sharp enough to keep my thoughts from spiraling. Below me, traffic moved like veins of light through the city, steady, indifferent. Inside, laughter had returned, thinner now, more forced. The party hadn't stopped. It never does. Institutions like Summit don't pause for discomfort. They absorb it, reframe it, pretend it never happened. I pressed my palms against the railing and took slow breaths. I wasn't shaking, that surprised me. What I felt wasn't rage, it was something quieter and heavier. Disbelief. Not at Derek. Men like him are predictable. What hurt was Daniel's reaction, the instinctive damage control. The fear so ingrained, it overrode his sense of right and wrong. When I finally went back inside, the room felt different. People looked at me, some with curiosity, some with sympathy, a few with outright respect. Others avoided my eyes entirely. No one said anything. Silence, I was learning, is a language of its own. Daniel was across the room with Derek's assistant and two senior executives. He looked composed, professional, exactly how he'd been trained to look when things went wrong. When he caught my eye, relief flickered across his face, followed quickly by anxiety. I ordered another drink and stood near the bar, letting the bartender's steady movements ground me. He slid the glass toward me, with a look that hovered somewhere between concern and admiration. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. "You could say that," I replied. 3 days later, I was in my home office, sunlight spilling across my desk as I worked on a proposal for a financial institution in Chicago. My phone buzzed with an email from my business partner, Marcus Chen. Subject: Summit Creative having a bad day. LOL. I opened it and nearly laughed coffee through my nose. It was a forwarded email chain, one of those corporate panic spirals where everyone hits reply all and no one actually solves anything. Summit's creative department servers were down, files inaccessible, suspected data corruption, deadlines looming. I logged in. The problem jumped out immediately. Their systems administrator had ignored 17 automated warnings about a critical security update. 17. The vulnerability allowed database corruption when large files were accessed simultaneously, which, of course, happened when the entire department tried to download the same client presentation at 8 a.m. I could fix it in 20 minutes. My phone rang. "Natalie," Daniel said, voice tight, "the servers are down. Everything's down. Derek is losing his mind. We have a client presentation in 3 hours, and no one can access anything. He exhaled. "I needed to hear your voice." Guilt is a powerful thing. It creeps in quietly, makes you question your boundaries. "It's probably a system update issue," I said carefully. "These things usually resolve quickly." I hung up and stared at my screen. I thought about the party, the spit, the words "he's mine." I thought about Daniel's fear, about loyalty, about marriage. Then I fixed it. 22 minutes later, Summit's servers were running smoothly. I patched the vulnerability, repaired the corrupted data, even optimized a few systems, because professionalism doesn't turn off just because the client doesn't deserve it. An hour after that, Marcus forwarded me another email. This one was from Derek, sent to the entire company. "Thanks to my direct intervention and quick thinking," Derek wrote, "we've resolved this morning's technical issues. This is why strong leadership matters in a crisis." I laughed out loud. Daniel came home late that night, exhausted but relieved. "Whatever happened," he said, dropping his bag, "it just fixed itself." I watched him closely. "Did Derek take credit?" He winced. "Of course." I didn't say anything. Because here's what Derek didn't know, what Daniel didn't know yet. Every action on that system was logged, time-stamped, attributed. My name was all over it. And Derek's little performance had caught the attention of people who didn't tolerate fiction. By Thursday afternoon, Daniel called again, this time with a strange edge of amusement in his voice. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "The board ordered a full IT audit. Derek's been bragging about his tech expertise, and apparently someone up there actually knows what they're talking about." I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile forming. Audits don't care about ego. They care about facts. And facts, as I knew very well, were on my side. The audit didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly. Calendar invites, closed-door meetings, unfamiliar names looping into email threads. But the energy inside Summit shifted almost immediately. You could feel it through Daniel's voice when he called me that night, through the way he hesitated before choosing his words. "They're asking a lot of questions," he said, "about vendors, about contracts, about system architecture." I didn't respond right away. Not because I was hiding anything, because I was bracing for what came next. By Friday morning, the board had brought in an external firm, serious people, the kind who don't smile much and don't care who thinks they're important. They requested access to logs, contracts, maintenance records, the full picture. Derek, according to Daniel, was suddenly everywhere. He hovered, inserted himself into conversations, reframed himself as indispensable. He told anyone who would listen that he'd personally overseen the company's tech strategy for years, that he had a deep understanding of the infrastructure, that the outage was an anomaly already handled by him. The more he talked, the worse it got. Because confidence is loud, but evidence is louder. That afternoon, Daniel called again. This time, he didn't try to hide the strain. "Something's off," he said. "The auditors asked about Cooper and Chen's cybersecurity solutions." I closed my eyes. "And?" I asked. "And apparently," he continued slowly, "the CFO mentioned that your firm saved the company 6 figures last quarter by preventing a potential breach." There it was. The silence on the line stretched. "Daniel," I said gently, "what do you know about my work?" He exhaled. "That you build furniture and consult sometimes." I smiled faintly, alone in my office. "I do consult, full-time. I designed Summit's infrastructure 3 years ago. My firm still maintains it." Another pause, longer. "You're serious?" "Yes." By Monday morning, the truth was no longer containable. Emails started circulating. Invitations for coffee, requests for introductions. The tone shifted from dismissive to deferential in a matter of hours. People who had once smiled politely now leaned forward, attentive. Daniel came home that night pale, stunned. "Everyone knows," he said. "The audit report came back. Your name is everywhere." I told him everything then. The contract, the design, the maintenance, why I hadn't talked about it, why I'd let people believe the simpler story. "I didn't want it to be a thing," I said quietly. "Your career mattered. Mine didn't need the spotlight." He sat heavily on the couch, head in his hands. "Derek found out," he said. I didn't ask how that went. "He turned white," Daniel continued, like someone had just told him the ground wasn't solid anymore. Over the next few days, Derek tried to rally support. He framed himself as the victim of a misunderstanding, claimed he'd been blindsided, suggested I'd misrepresented myself, deceived the company. It didn't land. When you spend years burning bridges, you don't get to ask for help when the fire reaches your feet. The executives didn't side with him. HR didn't rush to protect him. The audit logs were clean, precise, unforgiving. Every fix, every update, every action, mine. Then came the email. From Angela Martinez, head of HR. Subject, confidential, professional consultation request. They were conducting a formal review of workplace conduct related to the annual party. They wanted me, as a third-party professional consultant, to provide context. I read it twice. Then I called Daniel. "They want me to come in," I said. There was a beat of stunned silence. "They do?" "Yes." "Oh my God," he breathed. "Natalie, this means they're actually taking it seriously." We both knew what that meant. The following Tuesday, I walked into Summit's downtown office wearing a tailored black suit and heels I rarely bothered with. The building looked the same, glass and steel and quiet ambition. But I felt different walking through its doors. Angela Martinez met me in reception, efficient, focused, a woman who'd seen everything and tolerated very little. In the conference room sat a legal representative, a note-taker, and Derek's assistant, who couldn't meet my eyes. I told the story, calmly, precisely, no embellishment. The comments, the claim of ownership, the spit. "Were there witnesses?" Angela asked. "Dozens," I replied. "It was crowded." She nodded. "Their accounts align." Then she showed me the video. Someone had recorded the entire exchange. The audio was clear. Derek's words unmistakable. The gesture worse on screen than in memory. When the meeting ended, Angela looked at me with something close to respect. "On behalf of Summit Creative," she said, "I apologize for what you experienced. That behavior does not reflect our values." I stood. "Save that apology for your employees," I said evenly. "They've endured far more." 3 days later, Derek Walsh was suspended pending investigation. 2 weeks after that, he resigned. The fallout was swift and absolute. And for the first time since the party, I felt something settle inside me. Not triumph. Balance. You'd think the worst part would be over once Derek was gone. In some ways, it was. The noise stopped. The tension at Daniel's work eased. His shoulders lowered for the first time in months. But relief has a strange way of exposing what's been buried underneath it. When the adrenaline faded, I felt the weight of everything that had happened press down on me. The party replayed in my head at night, the room going silent, the spit, Daniel's hand tightening around my arm, not to protect me, but to pull me away. I understood why he'd reacted that way, but understanding didn't erase the hurt. One evening, after dinner dishes sat untouched in the sink, I finally said it. "You were going to apologize for him." Daniel froze. "I know you were scared," I continued, voice steady, "but you were willing to apologize for someone who humiliated me." He sat down slowly. "I wasn't choosing him over you. It felt like you were choosing safety over me." Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. "I've spent years learning how to survive there," he said finally. "You don't push back. You endure. That's how you make it. And if enduring means letting someone treat your spouse like property?" He had no answer. That was the darkest moment. Not Derek, not the humiliation, but the realization that the system had trained someone I loved to accept unacceptable behavior as normal. For days, we moved carefully around each other. Polite, functional, loving, but wounded. I questioned myself more than I expected. Had I made things worse? Had I jeopardized his career by not staying quiet? Was my silence earlier a mistake, or my refusal now too much? I felt isolated in a way I hadn't anticipated. Friends congratulated us. Justice was served, they said. Everything worked out. But they hadn't been there on that balcony. They hadn't felt the split-second calculation between dignity and survival. One night, lying awake, I stared at the ceiling and let myself feel it fully. The fear, the vulnerability, the knowledge that power had almost protected the wrong person, again. If the audit hadn't happened, if the video hadn't existed, if I hadn't been who I was. How many others had walked away quieter, smaller? That thought hollowed me out. I started questioning my own restraint. The years I'd kept my work invisible. The way I'd shrunk myself to make things easier for others. The assumption that silence was neutral, not complicit. I wasn't proud of that anymore. Daniel noticed the change before I said anything. "You're different," he said one morning as we drank coffee in silence. "I am," I replied. "I don't want to be invisible anymore." He nodded slowly. "I think I don't either." That was the beginning of our turning point, though neither of us recognized it yet. The night before Derek's resignation became official, Daniel came home late, drained. "He cleared out his office today," he said. "No one said goodbye." I pictured Derek alone in that glass building, his power evaporated. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something quieter, final. Still, a part of me was uneasy. Justice had been served, yes, but the cost had been high. Trust had cracked. Illusions had shattered. I stood at the window that night, watching the city breathe. This was the lowest point, not because we'd lost something, but because I could no longer pretend things were the same. And once you see clearly, you don't get to look away again. The turning point didn't arrive with drama. It came quietly, the way real shifts usually do, through clarity instead of chaos. 3 weeks after Derek's resignation, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He didn't drop his bag by the door. He didn't reach for his phone. He just stood there for a moment, watching me move around the kitchen like he was seeing me from a new distance. "They offered me his position," he said finally. I stopped. "Creative director," he added. "Effective immediately. New reporting structure. New leadership above me. They said they want someone who understands the work and the people." I turned to face him, searching his expression. Not for excitement, but for certainty. "And what did you say?" I asked. "I said yes," he replied. Then, after a beat, but only after I told them something. I raised an eyebrow. I told them I wouldn't accept it if the culture stayed the same. No intimidation, no blurred boundaries, no quiet tolerance of bad behavior just because someone delivers results. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but something close to pride. "They listened," he said, "really listened." That was when I understood. This wasn't just about Derek anymore. It was about what we were willing to accept going forward. That night we talked, not defensively, not carefully, but honestly. About fear. About survival, about how easy it is to confuse endurance with strength. "I should have protected you," Daniel said quietly, "not smoothed things over, not minimized it." "I didn't need you to fight," I replied. "I needed you to stand with me." He nodded. "I know that now." The shift wasn't loud, but it was real. At work, Daniel stepped into his new role differently. He listened more, interrupted less, pushed back when pressure turned into disrespect. People noticed. Productivity didn't drop. It improved. Morale lifted. Teams stopped bracing for impact and started thinking creatively again. At home, I stopped shrinking. I didn't hide my work anymore. I didn't downplay my expertise. When people asked what I did, I told them, calmly, without apology. The next summit party came around months later. Same venue, same skyline, same overpriced everything. But the atmosphere had changed. People spoke freely, laughed genuinely. When Daniel introduced me, it wasn't as an accessory or an afterthought. "This is my wife, Natalie," he said proudly. "She designed the systems that keep this place running." No qualifiers, no jokes. I watched the realization land on people's faces. Not awe, not envy, just respect. The kind that doesn't demand silence in return. Later that evening, a junior developer approached me nervously. "I just wanted to say," he said, "the infrastructure you built is elegant. Studying it helped me understand what good design actually looks like." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. Standing there, surrounded by conversations that no longer felt rehearsed, I understood something fundamental. Power isn't loud. It doesn't need to spit or claim ownership or dominate rooms. Real power is quiet competence. It's knowing your value without demanding others kneel to it. It's choosing dignity even when silence would be easier. Derek had mistaken fear for authority. I had once mistaken invisibility for peace. Neither held up in the end. The fallout didn't explode. It collapsed. Slowly, quietly, publicly enough for those paying attention. Derek Walsh didn't leave Summit with a farewell email or a standing ovation. There was no announcement framed as gratitude, no carefully worded praise for years of service. One morning, his name simply disappeared from the internal directory. His office light went dark. His meetings were reassigned. The company moved on the way corporations always do, efficiently, without sentiment. But people noticed. Stories began surfacing, cautiously at first. Conversations that used to die the moment someone approached now continued. Junior employees compared notes. Senior staff admitted, quietly, that they'd known for years something was wrong, but hadn't known how, or whether, it could ever change. Derek's influence evaporated faster than I expected. He tried to stay relevant, reached out to former colleagues, floated narratives about misunderstandings and unfair optics. But when your power is built on fear, once that fear dissolves, there's nothing left to stand on. No one rallied behind him. Meanwhile, Daniel's world transformed. As creative director, he did something Derek never had. He delegated trust. He set boundaries. He didn't glorify burnout. When emergencies arose, they were handled without theatrics. When mistakes happened, they were corrected, not punished. People responded. Turnover dropped. Productivity rose. The department's work improved, not because they were pushed harder, but because they were finally allowed to breathe. At home, the shift was just as profound. Daniel stopped apologizing for existing outside of work. He came home on time more often. We planned weekends without contingency clauses. We laughed more easily. And I quietly, deliberately, stepped fully into myself. I accepted speaking invitations. Took on high-profile consulting projects without hiding behind euphemisms. I didn't correct people when they assumed I was important. I let them be right. Summit's executive team sent a gift basket, expensive coffee, artisan chocolates, a note thanking me for my professionalism during a challenging period. There was also a discreet settlement offer attached, an NDA in exchange for silence. I declined the NDA. I kept the chocolate. 3 months later, Daniel came home one evening with an expression I hadn't seen before, unfiltered joy. "They made it official today," he said. "The board, the promotion, it's permanent." I hugged him hard. Not because of the title, because of what it represented. The next company party felt like a different universe. Same rooftop, same skyline, but the energy was lighter. Conversations were real. People didn't flinch when leadership approached. They engaged. I noticed something else, too. No one mentioned Derek. Not once. Until almost a year later. I was attending a cybersecurity conference in Chicago, speaking on a panel about infrastructure resilience. Afterward, walking through the exhibition hall, I saw him. Derek, standing at a vendor booth in a cheap polo shirt, demonstrating software to an audience that didn't exist. He looked smaller, less polished. His confidence had dulled around the edges. He didn't recognize me at first. Then he did. The recognition hit him like vertigo. "Natalie," he said, voice catching. "Wow. Hi." "Hi," I replied pleasantly. "You were on that panel earlier, right?" I was. He nodded too quickly. Impressive, really impressive. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I hear Daniel's doing well, he said carefully. He is, I replied. He's changed the department completely. Derek swallowed. I made mistakes, he said. That night, I was under a lot of pressure. You weren't under pressure, I said calmly. You were comfortable. The truth landed hard. I don't want anything from you, I added. I'm just passing through. I wished him luck, not cruelly, not kindly, just neutrally. Then I walked away. Behind me, Derek remained at his booth, still trying to sell something no one seemed interested in buying. And that was the end of it. No revenge, no victory speech. Just consequences unfolding exactly as they should. A year after that night, my life looked nothing like it used to, and yet in many ways, it finally felt honest. Daniel thrived in his role, not because he chased power, but because he redefined it. People trusted him. They stayed. They grew. The department Derek once ruled, through fear, became a place built on respect, and that shift rippled outward in ways no KPI could fully measure. As for me, I stopped hiding. I no longer softened my achievements to make others comfortable. I no longer introduced myself with qualifiers. I didn't need to dominate rooms or prove anything. I simply took up the space I had always earned. And the strangest part? No one fought me for it, because confidence doesn't need permission. Looking back, I understand now that Derek was never the real antagonist. He was just the most obvious symptom of a system that rewards silence, excuses cruelty, and mistakes endurance for strength. The real conflict was internal. It was the moment I had to decide whether dignity was negotiable, whether peace was worth invisibility, whether love meant staying quiet or standing firm. That night at the party forced the question, and answering it changed everything. I didn't win because I exposed him. I didn't win because he fell. I won because I refused to disappear. Because I chose clarity over comfort, boundaries over fear, self-respect over survival. If there's a lesson here, one I hope anyone listening carries with them, it's this. Power built on intimidation will always collapse under scrutiny. Silence protects abusers, never the abused. And you don't need revenge to heal. Sometimes, moving forward is the sharpest consequence of all. I used to think strength was about staying quiet and enduring. Now I know better. Strength is knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone convince you that you are less.